My head was still ringing from the loud music and the laughter of friends when I left the bar in Chicago. It was already nearing 2 in the morning, getting into my old Chevrolet. I thought that perhaps I shouldn't have had that last glass of whiskey. After driving a few blocks, I realized I'd forgotten how to get onto the main road leading to my suburban home. Opening my GPS, I began to follow the directions. As I moved through the deserted city streets, I noticed that a particular black car, probably a Dodge Charger, had been maintaining a distance behind me for several minutes. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but when I made 2 unexpected turns, the car still followed. My heart started pounding rapidly. I decided to test its intent and floored the gas pedal. My Chevrolet lunged forward, but the Dodge Charger kept pace, even accelerating. I managed to merge onto the I-290 highway. Hoping to lose the pursuer among other vehicles, I pushed the speed even more. But the Dodge was relentless. It clung to me like a shadow, occasionally getting so close that I could see my own frightened reflection in its headlights. My first thought was to call the police, but my phone was dead. I decided to exit the highway and try to find refuge at a gas station or store. But when I took the Oak Park exit, the Dodge was still on my tail, and at one bend, it came so close to colliding with me. In a panic, I turned onto an old road leading into a dense forest. The trees tightly covered the sky, and in the pitch black, I could hardly see. I hoped I might lose him in the woods, but the Charger continued its pursuit. Suddenly, my car began to slow. It was running out of gas. I realized I'd soon be stranded and an easy target. Then, I spotted an abandoned structure ahead, an old wooden church. I darted inside, leaving the car behind, and hid in a corner behind the altar, trying to silence my breathing. After a few tense minutes, I heard footsteps. Someone entered the church. My heart nearly stopped when, in the beam of a flashlight, I recognized the face of my pursuer. It was one of the patrons from the bar. I remembered accidentally bumping into him as I left. He smirked, eyes locked onto mine.
"Did you think you could get away that easily?"
He hissed. But just then, a loud siren blared. He turned, and I saw the lights of an approaching police car. Someone driving by had noticed our chase and called the cops. The man quickly fled, leaving me in the church, trying to calm my racing heart and thanking my lucky stars. Moving into an old house in Brooklyn was a forced decision for me. After losing my job, I was looking for affordable housing, and this communal apartment seemed perfect. Honestly, the house itself looked rather gloomy. Worn-out walls, creaky floors, and dim lighting. The first few days in the new place were uneventful. I got to know my neighbors. A kind elderly lady named Emily, a young couple from Kansas, and a quiet man named Garrett, who lived across the hall. However, after a week, I started to notice oddities. In the mornings, my belongings weren't where I had left them. My coffee cup, which I always left on the kitchen table, was found in a cupboard. My shoes, which I left by the door, were placed near the window. By process of elimination, I assumed Garrett was the culprit. His room was always locked, and I never saw what he did inside. He avoided eye contact and spoke very little. One night, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Pretending to be asleep, I watched as my door slowly opened and Garrett entered. He looked around, took one of my shirts, and left without noticing me. The next morning, I decided to confront him. I approached Garrett's door and knocked. After a brief silence, he opened up. The room was dark, with only the outlines of old furniture visible and dust particles floating in the air. My belongings were hung on the wall and neatly placed on shelves as if they were exhibits in a museum. I was horrified. Garrett stared at me, and his eyes burned with a painful obsession. Bluish veins appeared on his pale face, and his long arms with unusually elongated fingers trembled slightly. In the corner of the room, I noticed a small altar with photographs and items I once considered lost. My glasses, a shirt, and even a notebook. An old record player stood by the wall, playing a slow, slightly distorted melody, adding to the eeriness of the atmosphere. Garrett smirked, revealing unusually sharp teeth.
I just wanted to be closer to you.
He whispered, his voice almost melodic. He approached me slowly, every step calculated and precise. I backed towards the door, trying to stay calm. "What do you want from me, Garrett?" I whispered, feeling fear grip my muscles.
You're special. I just wanted you to realize that.
He began, his gaze locked onto mine. Such attention from a neighbor I knew so little about was terrifying. Unable to take it any longer, I dashed for the door and ran out without looking back. Once safe in my own apartment, I immediately called the police. By the time they arrived, Garrett was gone. They searched his room, but all they found was the old record player and my belongings on the altar. Despite all efforts, Garrett was never found, but I never felt safe in that house again and soon moved out. However, every time I hear an old melody or see the flickering light of a candle flame, I am reminded of Garrett and his painful obsession with me. Social networks became a part of my daily life. Checking notifications on Facebook, posts on Instagram, and discussions on Twitter. Living in Los Angeles, I was fully immersed in the digital world. It all started accidentally. Last Saturday, after returning from a trip to the Griffith Observatory, I noticed a strange message in my Instagram DMs. Such a wonderful place for a work. Attached to the news was a photo of me taken from behind as I looked out over the city from the viewing platform. Pondering over the photo, I tried to recall which of my friends might have been there that day, but to no avail. Replying to the message asking who it was, I only got an emoji in return. The next day, after dinner at the Ivy on Robertson Boulevard, I received another message. "I liked your choice of dishes today." To my horror, attached was a picture of my table, seemingly taken from behind a curtain nearby. With each day, the messages became more threatening. I started receiving pictures of the interior of my house and my bedroom. In one of them, even my keys and wallet left on the table were visible. Panicking, I turned to the police, but they said that unless there was a real threat to my safety, they couldn't intervene. My only hope was to figure out who it was. I began carefully examining my friends list on social media. Who among them could know all these details of my life? Who could have motives to stalk me? Then it hit me. I had recently ended a relationship with Sarah, a social media fanatic. She had always been obsessed with me, and I began to suspect she was behind these messages. Deciding to act, I sent her a personal message expressing my suspicions. In return, I got, "You think it's me? Think again." That evening, coming home, I noticed a shadow in the doorway. Approaching, I saw a familiar face. It was Peter, an old friend and former colleague. In his hand was a phone, and on his face, a menacing expression. It turned out that Peter had been in love with Sarah and had been jealous of me all along. He used my dependency on social media to terrorize me. trying to make me leave the city and leave Sarah to him. The irony of the situation was that in a world where we are all so connected through technology, the real threat can come from the most unexpected source, your closest friend.